to you about the ballot measure, potential of a ballot measure, and present the draft ballot language for a potential November 2026 transactions and use tax. As I just said, the recommendation to council is to receive fiscal analysis, background materials, and draft ballot language related to a potential November 2026 1 cent, 1% transaction and use tax measure, and provide direction to staff. As we've seen in our previous presentation, and to set a little bit of history quickly, as we've talked about in the past, that for 33 years, Windsor has prided itself on safe neighborhoods, well-maintained streets, beautiful parks, and gathering places. The cost of providing these services is now rising faster than the town's revenues. To develop the 2025-2027 budget, we made $6 million in operational cuts. This included the 3 police officers that were formerly mentioned. We made the 10% operating cuts across the board. We've continued to hold vacant positions open. We deferred $5 million in maintenance, and even then we still needed to draw down $8 million from the reserves. So the recurring nature of the general fund shortfall is being driven by slow growing revenues set against contractually obligated salary, benefit, and operating cost escalators. This means that one-time solutions will not close the gap. We've talked about it a little bit already, but the reductions and cuts already implemented, the $6 million going into the budget. We've continued to freeze those positions. We're up to 9 now. We're saving just over $1 million in salary with those savings. I will point out, though, that a little bit of that has to be offset by consultants in the building department, only in the building department, because by law we need to have a building official and a building inspector. We talked about the 10% cuts across the board, and we continue to look at operating cuts and where we can reduce things. One reason I want to speak to quickly, we've talked about it, is we've frozen these positions because it's giving each department an opportunity to look at how they're structured and look at how they continue to provide the service they provide, maybe under a different model. On the list, there have been management positions that have been frozen, several to be, in fact. So the reductions that we've talked about have exhausted the town's capacity to reduce expenses without significantly affecting public-facing service delivery. I think this is an important point, and I mentioned it earlier. We feel that we're working hard, and I've thanked staff multiple times that we're not hearing that our service delivery has slowed or been abandoned too much at this point by the public, even with those $6 million. If we go further, there'll be no way to avoid that. So we've talked about the ongoing operational efficiencies. These are being done in parallel with the expense reductions, and we've continued to advance a portfolio of different ideas. The ERP implementation, it's replacing a legacy financial, payroll, utility billing, and procurement system. We've talked about the vacant positions. We've talked about technology-driven automation. We are using AMI water meters now. We were using software for short-term rental compliance. We're moving to a better records management system, which will reduce the staff time and impact there, and also online public records. Consulting cost reduction and review. We've been trying to insource as much work as we can and cut down on some of those consultants that we've used in the past, especially when they're not a cost recovery model. As you know, in the development and construction world, a lot of the third-party plan check review that we use, it's paid for by the developer, so it's not affecting the general fund. However, we are trying to take things in-house in other areas, and that is slowing our production and our response times, but it also is saving a little bit of money. We're actively looking for grants. We're looking at offsetting general fund pressure for the capital programs, both in the enterprise funds and the general fund. And again, I've mentioned we've looked at our service delivery model, and we continue to see how we can try to tweak that for further savings. So even with full execution of the efficiency portfolio, the projected general fund shortfall remains in the $4 to $5 million range. As we've talked about before, I wanted to touch that, going into after being directed by council to continue to investigate the potential of a tax measure, we've done some extensive community engagement. You've heard analyst Burgess in the past talk about all the meetings we've attended. Here's a list of those again. I want to thank staff, for presenting these, but also, thank everybody that came to these meetings. We heard a lot of great input at these meetings, heard a lot of positivity, heard a lot of concerns, and a lot of really good questions. On that note, things that jumped out. So number one were that residents value town services. They want to protect the town, particularly public safety, roads, and parks. For a lot of people we heard, that's why they moved here. That's why they've chosen to raise their family here. The Parks and Recreation Department, as you know, perhaps a little bias on my part, but they create community and sense of place. Being 100% general funded, as we saw in the previous presentation, they are set to take the biggest hit if we move to a Plan B budget. We had residents engage us with an open mindset for the most part. We thought that was great. We had thoughtful questions, detailed questions about alternatives and what the impacts would be. And one thing we heard was that should there be a tax measure move forward, and if it was approved by the voters, they would like to be sure that there was strong oversight and reporting on how that money is being used. That I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you very, very much, Town Manager Davis. As I noted earlier in earlier presentations, staff looked at a wide variety of revenue-raising tools available to the town, and a local sales tax measure was the best fit. This isn't unique to Windsor or to Sonoma County. Local sales tax measures have become the predominant tool used by California cities to protect general fund services against slow-growing property tax revenues, as well as the cost of unfunded state mandates that are really driving up the costs of local government. It is also one of the few local tools that stays under genuine local control. The state cannot redirect these funds. A sales tax spreads the cost broadly across everyone who shops in Windsor, including visitors and non-residents who use our roads, parks, and services, but pay no property tax here. And I also wanted to add that many of the essentials residents rely on a day-to-day basis aren't taxed at all. Groceries, prescription medications, diapers, and most services are exempt from sales tax. A local sales tax is now the norm, not the exception. With 321 of California's 382 cities, about 67% of cities have a local sales tax measure. The cities without a sales tax measure fall into two kind of narrow groups. One is the wealthy residential enclaves. These are the Athertons, the Woodsides, that really have a very large property tax base of expensive homes and very little retail base. The other are the newer Orange County master planned communities. They're built as residential communities, and they have newer homes that aren't subject to the restrictions that are less impacted by Proposition 13, so they are getting a substantial amount of property tax. As you know, Windsor really doesn't fit either one of those patterns. So if we did raise a 1% tax in Windsor, it would be falling in line with our neighbors. As you can see here, it would raise us to 10.25%, matching Cotati, Petaluma, and Sonoma, and still below Sebastopol. I did want to note that both Santa Rosa and Rohnert Park are both expected to go to the voters as well in November to raise their rates, likely putting them at 10.25 and 10.5. Windsor residents also already pay our neighbor's sales tax rate. So when they shop in Santa Rosa or Rohnert Park, they're paying the neighbor those sales tax rates. While when those residents shop in our community, they're paying a lower sales tax rate and not funding our parks programs, our roads, our police, as we're doing in those other communities. And what that looks like is lower per capita general fund revenue for the town of Windsor. So I threw up a couple of examples here, and this is essentially the general fund revenue divided by the number of residents. As you can see, we are significantly below many of our neighbors. And that really has to do with the fact that we don't have a local sales tax to generate that revenue. So a 1% sales tax would raise about 5.7 million annually. And as is touched on before, that is a sufficient amount of revenue to close the structural deficit and to begin addressing the deferred maintenance that has grown in the town of Windsor. If it was passed by voters, we would start collecting that revenue on April 1 of 2027 in order to start planning for that in our next budget cycle. So we've talked a little bit about the amount of the measure. What we haven't talked about is the term. So in California, the election law requires that you specify a term in the language of the measure. This can be either a fixed sunset, so 10, 15, 20 years, or a statement that the tax will remain in effect until amended by voters. There's not the option to remain silent on duration. So in order to better understand how this works, we looked at the 95 general purpose local sales tax measures that went to the voters in California in 2024. Very similar to what we're proposing here in Windsor. Of those 85 measures, or 95 measures, 81% passed. If we broke them out by the measures that used the language until ended by voters versus those with a fixed sunset, we see that those with the language until ended by voters pass at a substantially higher rate, 92% as opposed to 70%. It's just a data point that I thought was interesting to share with the council, and that's a statewide data point. Moving a little local, we see that 9 of the 12 active city measures in Sonoma County use the until ended by voters language. Only Santa Rosa has 2 measures that have sunsets, and of the 3 Sebastopol measures, 1 of them does have a sunset. As you can see, Windsor does not have a local sales tax. So why until ended by voters? So I really wanted to walk through the 4 findings that help make staff's recommendation. First, until ended by voters matches the structural nature of the gap. We have an ongoing general fund shortfall. It's reoccurring. It's driven by cost escalators, unfunded state mandates, et cetera. A sunset would force a renewal vote during the tough years of budget planning that we would depend on that revenue for. As noted in the previous slide, they have a favorable passage record. They actually pass at a higher rate than those measures with a fixed sunset. And I think most importantly, it preserves the ongoing voter authorities. Voters retain the ability to terminate the tax through a future ballot measure on a timeline of their choosing, rather than one that is locked in with an original term. It avoids also avoids the renewal cycle. Every Sonoma County city that has started with a temporary tax has eventually returned to the voters to renew it. The until ended by voters and 1% allows us to go to the voters with one ask in order to solve our problem moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to talk through the ballot language question.
Okay, so turning to the ballot question itself, California Elections Code 13119 is very prescriptive. It requires that the ballot question identify the rate, duration, and annual revenue, and an impartial statement of purpose. And it must fit within a 75-word limit. With that constraint, the town is also choosing to include accountability language, such as independent audits and citizen oversight, even though this is not required by statute. That reflects what we consistently heard from residents throughout the engagement process. Next slide, please. Services prioritized by residents. The services referenced in the ballot question are not arbitrary. They come directly from what we heard across our 17+ engagement sessions. Residents consistently emphasize the importance of street repair and maintenance, neighborhood police patrols, emergency response, traffic enforcement, parks and recreation, community events, disaster preparedness, and fire prevention activities, including brush and fuel removal. These are the core services residents wanted protected, and the accountability elements, transparent budgeting, independent audits, and a citizens oversight committee directly respond to the community's call for stronger safeguards. Next slide, please. Next is the draft ballot question for council review this evening. The full text is included in the agenda report, and I'll read it aloud in just a moment. The draft incorporates all of the elements required by state law: the rate, the duration, the revenue estimate, and an impartial description of essential services drawn directly from what we heard during the community outreach. It also includes the accountability commitments council and staff has emphasized throughout this process: independent audits, citizens oversight, and local control of all funds. With that context, I'll read the draft ballot question. To provide funding for the Town of Windsor to maintain essential local services such as repairing potholes and maintaining streets, neighborhood police patrols, emergency response, traffic enforcement, preserving parks, community events, disaster preparedness and fire prevention, including removal brush, flammable fuels, for general government use, shall the measure establishing a 1-cent sales tax providing approximately $5,700,000 annually until ended by voters, requiring independent audits, citizen oversight, and all funds remaining in Windsor under local control be adopted. That is a working draft. Staff will refine it based on council's direction this evening and return with the final 75-word version on July 15th, alongside the implementing ordinance. Finally, I just want to preview the accountability framework, which returns to council on June 17th. Residents were very clear that any revenue measure must include strong, visible accountability. The framework includes 3 components. First, town staff will remain consistent in transparent public budgeting with council-adopted spending priorities reviewed openly each budget cycle. Second, independent and annual audits, a third-party audit of sales tax revenues and expenditures presented in public session. And third, a citizens oversight commission focused specifically on sales tax revenues. It's structured to provide meaningful public oversight. Together, these elements ensure that if the measure moves forward, it's paired with clear and ongoing accountability mechanisms. And next steps. I want to clarify the sequence of the upcoming council actions. On June 17th, council will be asked to adopt the resolution calling the November 2026 general election for the purpose of opening the candidate nomination period. The resolution to actually place the transaction use tax measure on the ballot will return separately on July 15th, along with the implementing ordinance and the finalized 75-word ballot question. We will also be seeking authorization from council to prepare arguments and rebuttals in favor of the measure. Next slide. And with that, we're available for council questions.
Yeah, so I want to thank staff for the presentation. I just wanted to say that in the presentation tonight, there's really much the first time that we've touched on the term. We've heard about the term across our public outreach, and we know that's been on council's mind. We bring forward this recommendation after discussion with our residents, although we do know that there's those that were in favor of a term. I think important point that I want to make is that one thing that always stuck in my mind throughout the process of going out to the public is that I heard someone tell me, isn't it disingenuous to come with something that has a sunset? And what I believe is meant by that, as Tim reflected on, is that no tax measure that has ever been passed in Sonoma County or far beyond has ever sunsetted. Staff will always bring it back and always look to extend it. And so, as outlined clearly by Tim in the report, as a resident and a longtime member of the staff, I feel personally that it's disingenuous to ask for something shorter and not ask for until rescinded by voters, which we know the voters have the ability to do. So we may not find support for the tax measure should council support it. Given the level of impacts that were shared by staff earlier, I think it's important that we ask the residents how they feel about supporting their town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a question. When it says, and this is probably for the town clerk, so not doing the sunset, doing until asked by voters. So if the voters say do come back in 3 years and they want to rescind this tax measure, who pays for that to be on the ballot?
The town does. It's the same as a initiative.
Any other questions for staff? Before I open it up? No questions? Councilmember Salmon?
No
Mm.
comments. Listen. How many residents have to sign that petition?
It's a small percentage to start the circulation process, and then the vote just has to be more than 50% for passing. And if I may say also, if each time the town does bring it back, let's say if there is a sunset, then again, we're just paying each time.
Mhm.
So whether it's the town or a citizen, if I may say so.
I just mean that have a petition in order to request a ballot or whatever it is to terminate the tax, how many people have to sign that petition?
What percentage?
What percent? I mean, it's not a very large number.
Percent?
It's a few
It's no
thousand.
more than 10% to circulate.
But to circulate, but how to qualify? What percentage do you have to qualify? I think it's 10%, isn't it?
I believe so. I want to say about, it was just a little over. Yeah, I'll check. I have to check each time because the numbers fluctuate with each year that we have more people register to vote, but it's usually at least in the couple thousand.
That's the key point, I think. Thank you, clerk. It's 10% of registered voters, not of the total population.
Yeah.
And we'll confirm that for council as well.
Any questions? Vice Mayor, no? Okay, I will go ahead and open it up to the public. Anybody wishing to make a comment on this item, please approach the podium. State your name if you'd wish. It's 3 minutes, which is up there in red.
Hi, I'm Teresa Hendricks, and I live in Sam's district. And I just wanted to say I encourage you to put this measure on the ballot tonight, the way that it's written, pretty much exactly the way that it's written, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't read anything before they get their ballot or they go into the booth and they just read what's on the ballot and say, oh, am I going to vote for that? Yes or no. A lot of people are involved. A lot of people aren't. And the wording makes it very clear what's at stake and what the measure is all about. I do agree that it should be until ended by the voters because I think that's right. If there's a definite sunset date, people will just have to come back again and ask to extend it because I really don't think prices for anything are going to go down anytime soon. Certainly not in the next 10 years or 20 years. I did want to offer a little hope. If you read all of the Facebook groups in town and all the comments, what you really see are no new taxes. No, don't even put this on the ballot. No, don't do anything. So that was the same kind of reaction for SMART. But I know just the number of people talking to me around town very quietly say, you know, I'm going to vote for the sales tax measure. I think they should put it on. And yeah, thank you for speaking. A lot of people did like SMART as well. So SMART, I spent the afternoon looking up how Windsor residents voted on SMART. And the precinct maps that the county has online for Windsor don't exactly match the districts for council representation, but they come pretty close. And yes, everyone should check my math all the time. So, but looking at the interactive map that the county has online, Windsor voted for the SMART quarter-cent sales tax extension. 65% of Windsor voted yes, 35% of Windsor voted no. District 1 voted for SMART, 64% to 36%. District 2 voted for SMART, that's my district, 71% to 32%. District 3 voted for SMART, 62% to 37%. And District 4 voted for SMART, 68% to 31%. So you can see that Windsor voters do support paying for quality services. They wanted that good public transportation system and they voted for it. So I think they will vote to pay a little bit more in taxes to keep those police officers in parks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I might request for my light to be here because I'll have to get used to that.
Mary Ann Bainbridge Krause. First of all, I'd like to point out there has never been a survey. On all of the surveys that have been conducted in Windsor to the residents regarding the sales tax, they will not support it. Even the $50,000 survey that we paid for, that was never publicly presented at a town council meeting, the citizens do not support it. Comparing SMART to a sales tax measure, I think is irrelevant. I sent an email in and I'm going to read it because it states a lot of what I feel about this. I'm writing to you regarding Agenda 13.2, the presentation and direction of implementing a sales tax measure on the ballot for the town of Windsor. Staff is recommending a 1% forever sales tax measure. I will not vote for an unending forever sales tax measure. And to her point, Teresa's point, I've talked to many residents who have the exact opposite view of what she said. I will not vote for an unending forever sales tax measure that can be spent on anything. And it's right in your language, general services. A specific item sales tax measure, for example, police contract and services with a 10-year ending date would be more appropriate to present to the voters of Windsor. Please take my direction into consideration and place a specific item sales tax measure with an ending date of 10 years on the ballot in November. And I want to add one more thing. You guys work for us. You don't work for staff. We elect you. Listen to the voters. Thank you.
Hi, Betsy Malice, Flame Tree Circle. Last October, I was invited by town staff to a meeting to discuss Windsor's fiscal outlook. I was told in that meeting that a 1% forever sales tax was needed for Windsor's financial future security. During the next 8 months, hundreds of hours of staff time were used to get feedback, have conversations, and to listen to Windsorites. Now, 8 months later, we're exactly where we started, considering a ballot measure for a 1% forever sales tax. I'm not sure that those hundreds of hours of staff time was spent wisely. 2 different surveys and over $50,000 was spent, and both times the results showed that a tax measure would probably not pass. In 2024, while many school districts here in Sonoma County proposed and passed a bond measure, Windsor Unified School District's bond measure failed. It was the only school district bond measure to fail in Sonoma County. The wording on this ballot measure seems disingenuous, or at least not impartial. Of the 75 words, it uses 32 words to describe what this new tax could pay for, and only 5 words for its actual use. And those 5 words are and for general government use. So it can be used for anything. Anything that this council or any future council wants to use it for. Until ended by voters. The part that's left out is that the residents, voters, would have to foot the bill to circulate a petition, and that would have to be paid for by the residents to have this removed or stopped. So let's be honest. This is a new forever tax. You've already spent hundreds of staff hours and at least $50,000 on a survey whose results were never agendized or publicly presented. and you will need to spend at least another $50,000 to $75,000 to put this on the ballot. And all of your own indicators show this will probably not pass. This is not a good use of town's money and possibly why the town has budget issues. Please do not move forward with this losing ballot measure. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for discussion. Who would like to start?
You can start.
Go
I can
ahead.
Go.
Yes, Councilmember Simon?
So the question that was raised when we, probably back in October, if we go by what timelines is, are we going to poll and find out whether this ballot measure will pass, and we hire a consultant to do the polling? And that was going to cost, we were told, about $60,000. And we were told that to put it on the ballot at that time as a single item would cost about $60,000. And for me, when I looked at it, I thought, if that's the case, let's put it on the ballot and let people decide. And a lot of time went into this, is true, staff time, but a lot of that staff time is based on what are we going to do about this fiscal deficit? We just had a presentation of 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes talking about what we're going to do about this fiscal deficit. And we're not the only city that's dealing with this. So I think that answers one of the questions, what are we going to do? It appears to put this on the ballot, it's going to cost $27,000 because we have 3 positions, council members, two council members and a mayor. And I think it's the kind of town that I want to live in, to give people the choice. And whoever's on this council and whoever's on the staff, we're going to deal with whatever comes up, whether the measure passes or not, we'll deal with it. You've raised, Betsy, use for anything for government purposes. When you start to be specific about what you're going to use tax money for, it's a special tax. There's probably exceptions. Special tax, 2/3 to pass. And I think we don't have to poll that. 2/3 tax measure, we'll see. Smart made it. I think they did, right? They got 70%. But what they called that was a landslide. If Smart would have been a special tax, it would not have been a landslide. It would have been, we just made it, 70%. So I think I'm very supportive of the process that went through. And I trust that who knows how voters will vote. I'm waiting for the results of yesterday's election to see how I perceive voters will vote. And I think staff, you've done due diligence. Do we work for Mary Ann, do we work for the people here in Windsor, the voters, or do we work for staff? No, we work for the voters because they're the boss. They're the ones that hire us and fire us. But the other side of it is we're part of a team. And we have to, at least that's my perception. It's always been that perception. We're part of a team. We have to support staff. And staff has to support us. And, staff doesn't necessarily work for the council, they work for the town. And we don't hire and fire staff. If anybody we work for, it would be the manager. Or who, it's interesting to be on the council. That's why I'm still on the council, because it's so interesting. It's so exciting in many times. And tonight's been exciting. So thank you. Sorry, Rosa.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you put in on many months on this. And I already complimented you on what a great document I thought you produced for this presentation today. I just think it's fantastic. I just wanted to correct the impression that that we wasted hundreds of hours in order to investigate what we were doing here. The problem has come up. It's a real problem. It's not a fake problem. And so in order to figure out how to solve this problem and to talk to people, it takes a couple hundred hours worth of work. And you have to go do that work and do that homework in order to find out the alternatives that you have in order to solve the problem. So I have no problem and no complaint about spending that time. We have to spend that time. So I think it's not a great complaint. With respect to the cost, I think Sam clarified it, that it does cost only $27,000 to put this on the ballot because we have other things on the ballot. So it's we just have to make sure that we get that number correct there. And it was actually, I think in April, Sam, when we sat down and asked that question, why would we go ask the voters? It cost us less to just put it on the ballot. And that was, I think, the decision we were recommending back in last April. So anyway, I think it's great. As I've said before, let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let's put it on the ballot. Let's see what happens. And let's do our best to try and get the facts out as we see them. Other people get the facts out as they see them. We'll have an election, have a ballot, and we'll see how she goes. I'm in favor of solving it the way that we've come up with.
Vice Mayor.
All right, thank you. So I agree with what the other council members said. I did want to ask, though, because as part of the presentation was that, and it was brought up during public comment that, maybe our poor spending is the reason why we're in this mess here that we have with our budget. But it really, this council specifically looks at every single cost and discusses. And as we said, we didn't hire consultants to do any of the work for this. We didn't go out and spend additional money for polling because we knew we were going to spend money, or it was, if we were going to spend the money, we were just going to spend the money to put it on the ballot. But unfunded mandates is what I want to talk about for a second. And unfunded mandates are just excruciating. And so, Tim, do you have a couple of examples of some of the unfunded mandates that cost the town money and things that we have to, by law, follow, and we don't get any money for that? They just come directly out of our general fund, and state officials, legislators, and the governor continue to create these unfunded mandates, like the electrification of our fleet, which we have to purchase more expensive vehicles, and we don't have a choice. We must do this, and we must create this plan. So staff hours have to be used to create a electrification plan going forward, and we can no longer buy gas-powered vehicles. We can only buy now electric vehicles. We have to put infrastructure into our town, into our city courtyard to power our vehicles, and all of this is with zero funding from the state. It comes directly from our general fund and from our funding. And those are things that we are mandated to spend our money on. We don't get a choice. And affordable housing is another one. Affordable housing, we know that they don't have to pay the same impact fees. We don't get property taxes from these housings that go up. And so it's a cost. All of those impacts are a cost to the general fund for police services, for Parks and Rec, for all of the things that we do for maintaining our streets. Zero back into the general fund for us. It comes directly out of our general fund. We are paying for those. We don't have a way to offset those costs, but we are mandated to spend them. And so it's very difficult for us to sit here and say, well, we're trying really hard. We know that we have an economic growth of over 4% a year, which is pretty reasonable, but it doesn't cover these costs. And it doesn't cover the staff time and hours that we have to use to follow these mandates. And so we have to have some other options. And so that's why we're asking. We know that we have a structural deficit. We know that our economic, our growth each year isn't going to cover these. And so we're going to send it to the voters and ask the voters for a tax measure. And I think that's the most realistic way of doing it, is to say, here's the information, and here, voters, you guys decide. It's not for us to decide. It's for you guys to decide. And if they don't decide, and if they decide not to pass the tax measure, well, then we have to go to our Plan B budget in the future, and it's going to be significant cuts, and it's going to be really difficult. And I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we're able to continue to give the good service that we provide right now for the town, and the maintenance to all of our parks and rec and everything that we have, and trying to keep our roads within a reasonable amount. I know there's a couple roads that I would like to see fixed. I would really like to see Shiloh Road look a whole lot better than it does. But right now that's a deferred maintenance. And so where do we get that deferred maintenance money? Right now we don't have it. Even with Plan B budget, we won't have deferred maintenance money to put into additional to our roads. So I want to send it to the voters, and I'm asking the voters to vote for it. And I think that we need to keep the power with the voters to be able to overturn it when they see fit. And so can you please put the actual measure up so we can see the language on it now? Thank you so much. Okay. So I am supportive of the language as it's written here, with the power staying with the voters, and with the wording, because it is a general fund tax. It will go to our general fund. And I believe that with oversight and significant independent audits, we will be able to spend the money, just as the town citizens want us to spend it.
So I want to say thank you to everyone here, all the public comments. Gosh, it was probably like 10 years ago. I was out in the audience and we had a presentation by Camille. You remember that, Betsy? I think she brought it to our attention as residents, but there was just a handful of us in the audience to hear that. So I kind of feel like, could I have done more as a resident to bring this to light, to challenge the council back in those days when I would hear the mayor say, we will find the money. We're going to spend it. We'll find it. We'll get it somewhere. Let's pass this. Let's approve it. And 3 of the 5 council members had to agree with that person, that mayor at the time, to spend money and keep spending money. So we didn't come here overnight. And I do agree with Vice Mayor. I do. And, that I feel like we've done a good job. We have said no to different department heads. We have said no to Charlie Johnson, who's in the audience. We've said no to different speakers, employees who come and ask for stuff. We've had to say no. So we've gone through this process. I think, Vice Mayor, you did a great job explaining a lot of the things that we've done where we didn't spend money to get to where we are. Yeah, maybe it wasn't perfect, but we're here now. And at this point, I agree, we need to just let the voters decide. They're going to decide whether they want this sales tax or not. And we'll have to move forward. And another point that I know everyone heard in the previous presentation, we are doing everything we can to cut. But even with Plan B, we can cut everything, but the deferrals aren't taken care of. All the deferral maintenance is not getting taken care of. So it's unfortunate we're here. It's unfortunate people are not shopping in Windsor. They're not staying in our hotels. The sales tax and TOT, could help. Would it be enough? I don't know. But yeah, so here we are. And I'll go ahead and support the language as it's written. If anyone wants to make a motion or no motion, just direction. So I think you've heard and have enough of us in direction.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've heard clearly that the language as written is acceptable to the council. We'll return as recommended or as stated by staff. I guess that will be on the 15th. And we'll have the mechanisms for formal adoption and placing it on the ballot at that time. And I did hear unanimously that we had support and support for the language.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.